Hi everyone, I'm Allison. Thank you for joining me for Where I'm From 167 with Anna. How have you been doing? It has been a week. I don't know. Or two or more. I don't know. It's just been a lot. So I'm excited for Anna to join me. I thought I wasn't going to be able to make it, but then I could. And so that's exciting to me. What have you been reading? I read Long Island Compromise by Taffy Brodesser-Akner, who wrote Fleischman. Not the whole title, but let me see if I can add Anna. Um, doo, doo, doo. Anyway, I hope that you all are hanging in there. It has been pretty challenging. Aha!
Hi.
How are you?
I am good, thank you. How are you?
I know, I was just saying, I feel like it's been, I mean, I think it's the election, but I think it's just also life. It's just been a lot lately.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's been a lot
Yeah.
all at once.
Yeah. Um, it just feels like heavy or something, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But I'm grateful to be here with you, and I'm grateful it worked out.
Yeah, me
Sorry
too.
for the
No,
shenanigans. So, did you want to say anything before you read your poem? Oh, you are now muted for some reason. Oh, now you're not.
because a call was coming in at the same time.
Yes, it
Um,
does that. Yes.
um, so, oh, hi, folks. We have some
Yes,
folks joining us
it's
already.
really
Yeah.
nice.
I think one of the things that maybe we'll talk about it after I read it.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'll just read it.
sounds good.
Where I'm from. Um, okay, where I'm from. I am from my small, dirty fingernails, from ALL, the stain lifter, that's all, and the farmer delivering glass bottled milk in his old red truck from the last farm in our town. I'm from that first little rented home, climbing onto the roof from the porch, the wild agency of a 3-year-old eating tofu hot dogs right out of the package and surveying the world below. I'm from the untamable garden, feral with tiny strawberries, their red, wet mess in my hand, the bittersweet taste on my tongue. I'm from gathering wild violets at my mother's invitation, her hand guiding mine as we mix micro flowers into butter and spread violet butter onto toast. I'm from Tzipporah Malka and Leiby, and from Bill and Jeannette. I'm from debating injustice over dinner, and my mother thrifting me the perfect red overalls, teaching me how to embroider flowers and butterflies all over my clothes. I'm from Tzedek Tzedek Tirdof, Justice Justice, you shall pursue, on my grandparents' wall. From the school called and couldn't you just get through this year? While my grandfather calls me over, whispers, to bring back tagging the anarchy symbol on city walls, like he did on the streets as a kid. I'm from menorahs on the windowsill and Buddhist monks at the breakfast table. I'm from the new house, so big I worried we'd get lost from each other. And we did, but not in the way I imagined. I'm from Connecticut children mocking, my parents said you're witches. And my father's laugh, his reply, they're not wrong. From New York City nights, falling asleep beside my grandmother. And from the Berry sisters' recording of Romania, Romania. I'm from matzo ball soup and Mama Liga. I'm from Lily fighting the capo in the camps so a mother and her children could survive. And the fact that Lily did not live to tell this tale is never the point. I'm from Bill organizing in Georgia and fleeing from the KKK. And I'm from the painter asking Bill's wife Jeannette if he can paint her, her freedom fighter husband refusing, and the way she'd sigh, shaking her head at the painter's work now in museums. Inside my mother's hallway dresser, my grandmother folded floral headscarves of every color into her top shelf, memories from her visits back to Seagate that she'd wear into the world. On top of the dresser, she kept photos of us. Mine, 4 years old, staring out, serious. The photo my mother said made her feel guilty, that maybe I had been a sadder child than she remembered. It was my favorite photo of me, the one where I wasn't posing for anyone. I felt grateful to her for displaying it, for showing us as we truly were.
That was beautiful, Anna. Um,
And
what a how,
prompt.
yeah, the man who created it, Fred Georgella, tells me, well, he's done us all such a service. It's traveled far and wide. It's an amazing thing.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was just an act of inspiration and kindness, and I'm grateful. Um, so I just related to a lot of it, sort of the bittersweet magic of childhood, but also like, so at least to me, it felt like so much freedom, which was similar to my childhood, that it's almost its own sense, it's its own source of loneliness,
Oh, interesting.
where you're like, wait, I'm a grown child, I don't know. I felt some of that, especially I think in the end when you're talking about the photo and the
Yeah.
sadness that,
I mean, I had a really, I think in a lot of ways, a really magical early
yeah,
childhood, where there was kind of like a safety to be unkempt and
yeah, yeah.
like I didn't feel, I don't know, like it was interesting in retrospect. Like both my parents were starting their careers, they were busy all the time, or a lot, but there was also like a tremendous freedom that was really cute.
Mm-hmm.
Like a, I had neighbors with little kids. I mean, it's funny. I was gonna say I had neighbors, and I didn't think of the adults. I thought of it as like I had neighbors who were my age. We had a community, and then
Yeah.
we all had parents. But there was like these little homes that were really close to each other, and we could kind of run across to each other. And I feel like I I might be misremembering this, but I just feel like nobody, like it was very kind of abstract. Like it was very just like I'm gonna go to so and so's
Oh, for
house,
sure.
right? And we
Yes.
were like
Hmm.
three, and you're just like okay,
Yes.
bye.
It's very different.
It's very
Hmm.
different. I think later, what maybe you're picking up on is like later I did have an experience of
Mm.
like neglect. Wait, like just after this ends, actually, like
Mm-hmm.
around 14 or so. But um, and I usually write about that. Like in my book, I focus a lot on sort of being a wild child city kid and around 14 and wandering New York, and that was a blast, but also terrifying in other ways. But but I think there's something really sweet that I don't really focus on a lot, which is those first few years where you're sort of
Beautiful.
new.
I mean, picking the wild violets and making violet butter and the strawberry, it was also like, I mean, it seemed magical and sort of what you would like to imagine for children, that they would have that relationship with the natural world and feel a part of it and not separate.
Yeah, I it's funny, like I had abstractly thought about that, but using the prompt, it felt really much more intense and alive. And
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
don't know why. Like throughout my life, I thought about like cute little quirky things we did as a kid.
mm-hmm,
And but when I wrote this, I was like, I think with those words, where I'm from,
mm-hmm.
it really helped me like, oh, this is a part of you too. Like
Yeah,
this is who you are
yeah,
as much as everything else.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the power of it for me. I think so often I just gave those things less space because they were long ago, and it's really changed my perspective to like they were long ago, but they're foundational experiences.
Yeah, and I love like the sort of I think what you're saying also is the both and of like we
Yeah,
were a little
yeah,
like there was a loneliness and there was a nobody really knowing where what you were up to.
yeah,
Um and there's a freedom and there's a magic. Like it's
mm-hmm.
all happening at
Yeah,
once. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because I have, I mean, I didn't grow up in a place with wild violets and strawberries, but I have my own, uh, I don't know, picking hibiscus and pomegranates and, running through our neighborhood. But, when the dog attacked me, I thought I was going to die because there was no one around to stop the dog. Like it was just a different I don't know.
Right.
We were definitely a little feral,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I grew up also, well, I didn't grow up with dogs. I grew up with a cat. And so I had I now I have a cute little dog, but I remember it being like feeling very, very tiny and that dogs were just roaming and they were like enormous somehow.
Especially if they were
Yeah.
big. I
Like
mean,
I
they
remember
felt they were bigger than
they,
us. They were bigger than me.
yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It was just one of those things, I mean, an older man came and beat the dog off with a newspaper, thank goodness. But I was with my friend, and as a child you think, why isn't she helping me? But now I know she was just as scared as I was. But you're a
Yeah.
kid, you can't think those thoughts. You're just like, wow, you're not a very good friend. Save me from the dog.
Yeah.
um but I I also so the whole thing about being witches, I also thought was interesting. So are you of Romanian descent? Did I catch that in
So
the no?
my family is Jewish. They're from the Jewish diaspora.
Yeah.
Most recently, before the U.S., they were in. My mom's side was in an area that switched between Romania and
Mm.
Hungary,
Hmm.
depending on who was occupying it.
Right.
And as of now, it's Romania. My dad's side is from Belarus, Ukraine. Although when I went back to my mom's town, not my grandmother's town, sorry, in Romania, Ukraine was literally across the street. Like it was just a sign, Ukraine, and like people. There was like Cyrillic, and the high
Hmm.
school was in Romanian, and which is same letters that we use, Roman letters,
Hmm.
and Cyrillic. And I was
Hmm.
like, why is that in Cyrillic? And I'm like, oh, because the Ukrainian kids from across the street also go to this school. So like,
Wow.
no one shared that with me when I was growing up. I don't know if the borders were a little different because we're always moving, but
Right, right. What an experience to return to. I guess you're not returning, but did it feel like a return because you heard about it, or did it feel new?
it did feel like a return. It felt really important
Hmm.
to sort of plant my feet in the soil that my grandparents and their parents grew up in.
Hmm.
We don't know where everyone was from, like next up before that,
Hmm.
but we know like there's been a few different places.
Yeah.
But it felt really special. Like my grandma, I sort of used to joke because when I was little, she and I would watch whenever I'd stay over, we'd watch Golden Girls when it was on like once a week. I think it was like Sunday night, so it was like we'd watch it together.
I loved
But I
that
remember
show.
later, what's that?
I love that show.
Yeah, amazing.
It's a great show. Hmm.
But I remember being like later being like she like sort of teasing that she was like Sophia about like picture it because
Hmm.
that was how she would talk about Siget, was how she talked
Hmm.
about her town in Romania. It was like nonstop. Everything was around that. And so that to me felt like oh, I need to be there. That she was such an
Hmm.
important part of my life and where she's from.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think when you're forced to leave a place, you don't, it's like anything where you can't say goodbye. I think it leaves this sort of wound in a different way than if you choose to leave.
it's absolutely, that's really a beautiful way to put it. And I think one thing about this prompt was it just brought up so many stories. And I don't know if
Hmm.
you've had that
Hmm.
experience where I'm like,
Hmm.
I had a running list of like of stories and fill in the blank words and
Yeah.
sensory memories, and like I had a running list of things that didn't fit in and like trying to figure out was there a place for them, and just things that had to not stay. But that piece about like having to leave, there was just so many stories about that, about sort of the oh, I know what I was going to tell you is like one story that I was going to put in that there wasn't really a space for, and that's fine. It's good to have to make choices. Um, but my grandmother would always talk about Romania in this almost defense way, like celebratory but
Hmm.
defensive of like. But it didn't feel defensive. It was a little different. But it was just about how like it was really important to her to tell the story of how everyone got along before they didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. Like
Yeah.
because I think the story became like, oh, we were deported and nobody wanted us, and then our family was all killed. But except for like a couple of people who survived.
Hmm.
But that she kind of wanted a different story, which was also true. Which is like neighbors were all different religions, and there were immigrants from all over, and people were really um, good to each other in her mind. I think
Hmm.
her bar was a little different. Like, I'd be like, where the
I mean,
hell
it's a
did they
very different time, right? Even before all that happened, it was a very different time. So acceptance was a different thing. It was like tolerance, I think, more.
It was definitely more like tolerance. There was also violence against them and
Right.
against my family. And
Sure.
so it's like,
Yes.
I don't know if there was
They weren't
like,
trying to kill her then. So that felt better, obviously.
right. It's like the, like they just
Yeah.
tried to beat us up. They didn't try to kill us. And I'm like,
Jeez.
well, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
But like she also had a lot of really good friends, in the community
Yeah.
that weren't Jewish and that were from like there was this divide. Jews weren't considered Romanian, which I think is a different thing of a different time where
Yeah.
um like she had citizenship but on her actual like passport to America or no and on her Romanian ID it says like country Romania citizenship like Jewish or something like that. Like they
I
didn't.
think it was the same with the Roma people as
Yeah.
well. It was just like they're just here right now. They aren't
Oh,
from here.
totally. And when I went back to Romania, the Roma existence is still very precarious. Like there's so much
Yes.
racism and everything.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Are you Roma? Did I miss that?
I think that it's not, as I don't have any confirmation, but when I've talked to people from Ireland, when I tell them about my grandmother, that's what they tell me she probably was. But I have I didn't know her. She was dead before I was born. So I have no claim to um, I would never say that I was, but it's just something that I've always then been more mindful of and thought about and
Yeah.
thought about some of the things that that side of my family did and the way they behaved. And it sort of makes some of it make sense.
Yeah.
Like that they just didn't feel safe in this world. Um, like they just kind of were always trying to run some kind of something to
Yeah.
make. So I don't know
Relatable.
if that's the case or if it was just the leaving Ireland because they were
Right.
starving, but I don't, yeah. Because I once told someone, oh, my family's from Ireland, an Irish person. They were like, oh, I mean, that's a Roman name, like they aren't Irish. Like,
Oh
oh,
wow.
okay. So I don't know, but it's just something I think it's also just a good thing to be aware of because they don't have a home and they were sent to death camps in World War II as well. And,
Yeah. It's and the reparations were really different for them
yeah,
or non-existent, I should say. Like
yeah,
we got some um settlement stuff. Like not that anyone asked
mm,
for it, but there was like
mm-hmm.
Swedish bank stuff that which is whatever. I don't know. I remember my grandmother was like we were broke, so I'm not sure what they're like giving us back, but and it doesn't take away what happened, but it's better
No,
to
right.
it makes it easier to right to move forward in some ways, to
Yeah.
have some kind of financial repair.
Mm-hmm.
Um and the Roma, I don't think I've ever gotten that.
No, they're just a group that is. I think partially it's interesting thinking about where I'm from. I think that's why, because no one claims them. They're from nowhere, and so it's either easier. It's easier for them to be invisible to
Yeah, I guess so.
people.
Yeah, I
It's like
mean the
they're
story
not
it's
ours.
what's that?
They're not ours. I mean, that's kind of the general feeling. You
Oh.
know, it's so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so I
mean
would
it's
never claim that because I have not lived with that reality. And I think that, people do and are. And it's devastating.
right. Right. And of course like they are like everyone is each other's and it's just sort of outrageous to be living it somewhere for at all and never mind like hundreds of years and still not
Yeah.
be considered um part of the
I
community or
think
not.
it's really difficult. And I mean, if you think about colonialism, it's also just so completely upside down. Like,
Sure.
you know, why were colonialists immediately from the place that they moved to? But immigrants were not. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And it's obviously rules that are made by someone,
Right.
and they aren't, I think they're rules designed to make a person feel completely insane. And they're successful in that.
Oh, totally. I mean it's abuse. And
Yeah.
I think that the right it's that manipulation of reality that it's like
Mm-hmm.
we love to call it gaslighting and we forget what gaslighting is because it's become like a
Yeah.
buzzword, but
Yeah.
the manipulation of reality to like this is not actually what's going on and people are like no it's what's happening you're fine it's fine you're like I don't think so.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
but also I think it's what we talk about like I really appreciate in a lot of movement spaces people calling a bunch of different communities as targeted communities versus
Mm-hmm.
marginalized communities, because it's not the passive. It's not like, oh, this, I wonder
Mm-hmm.
how these folks got pushed to the margins. Like, no, people are being targeted.
Yes, yes.
Um,
And I saw someone say worldwide majority recently, looking for writers from the worldwide majority. And I thought
yeah,
that's also a really empowering way of saying it,
uh,
instead of marginalized.
right, right, right. They're like, I was thinking this is also like in language, right? The way that people say
Yeah.
minority is such a purposefully dismissive term when it's when we're talking about global majority. It's a way of
Yeah.
making people count less who actually have much more power
Yeah.
available.
Yeah. And pointing that out because obviously the structures of power don't want to acknowledge that
Right,
reality.
right. It's like it's always who benefits by keeping folks feeling small or like
Yeah. Yeah.
wanting.
And it works. I mean, I think that's part of the reason I just feel overwhelmed. And I mean, because it does work, even when you're like aware of it. Sometimes it's just overwhelming to just feel like, you just have to kind of keep going day by day. And that's what I do. But there are just moments when you're like, God. And I think that, that feeling, a lot of people turn to hate.
Mm,
And I think that because they feel overwhelmed too. And it's like the goal for me is to not turn to that toward myself or others. Because
yeah.
I definitely turned it toward myself for a lot of my young life.
Oh, really?
Because yeah, yeah. That was one of my survival
Sure.
techniques.
That's an interesting way to put it. Hating yourself as a survival technique, but it's so real. Like I've
Yeah,
definitely had that. I feel like the more we don't hate ourselves, for whatever identity people are trying to put into a hate place. I think like as a queer person, it's been so important for me to
yeah,
like. It's interesting because I think for a long time I was like nervous about being super public about that, and the irony is like
sure.
when you're when I kind of became more like accidentally. I'm not that public to begin with, but to whatever degree I'm public, um, like just my book starting to come out and
Yeah,
people referring to me as like a queer
yeah,
writer was kind of like, ugh, I just want to be referred to as a writer. But the reality is, the
yeah.
more you own that, all that you are, even though we're so much more than identities, the more that I own that, the less it's possible to have it's less it's possible for self hate because it's like you take that back from other people, you
I
know?
agree. I feel that way about sharing, personal experiences and like having been a person who's been raped because now I'm sort of stepping away from the word survivor.
Oh,
I've
wow.
been talking to people and thinking about it, the word and yeah.
What word do you use instead, or
I
do you?
just said like I've been raped. I was talking about it with my friend who also has like, what does she say? And we were just talking about survivor almost just makes it seem all right on
Right.
some level,
Like we're celebrating you.
like and it's something I've thought about too. My brother died when I was younger, and his name was Michael, and I would never say his name because it like made it real. I would just kind of try to gloss over it, like, he died, moving on, to make the other person feel comfortable. And I think Survivor's similar. I think it's for other people.
This is Yeah, I have a lot of similarities with you, which is really interesting. Like, probably not gonna have time to get into all of them, but I and I read about them too. So like both sexual assault, and I'm really curious now about not using the word survivor. And my brother died when I was younger,
I'm sorry. What was his name?
Jake. Um, and actually, I kind of wrote up until that point, which is interesting. Like he died when I was around 6 or 7, and
Oh,
um,
God. I'm sorry.
no, I mean, thank you, and
It changes you. I
yeah,
mean, it changes you. There's no
but I
denying
think
that it
that was
changes
something
you.
that was precious about writing this poem,
Mm-hmm.
where you asked us to really talk about
Mm-hmm.
childhood, and I stuck to.
Yeah.
I didn't do it on purpose, but it kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get until it's before that happened. So
Yeah.
there is an innocence bubble
Yeah.
in that in the pre times.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. It's a different outlook for sure on life. Um, yeah. It,
Yeah.
it makes it real. I recently read the book Always a Sibling by Annie Sklavor-Orenstein, and she talks about all kinds of sibling loss, and she talks about losing I was 10 when my
Oh,
brother died,
wow.
and she talks about how people who lose siblings young, like life just feels more precarious in general. Like you think, oh, I'm going to die soon
Oh,
too because he died,
oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not funny, but it's funny. Like
It
it's
is funny because I'm 50 and I'm like amazed I'm alive,
absolutely.
you
And
know?
I'm always like we're kind of in that it's like a freedom that it looks like cynicism, but I think there's a freedom to it because I'm like I'm 43. For some reason, I still have to like think of how old I am, but
I know 50 is a good number. It's easy for me to remember.
yeah.
But in the 40s, I was like, I don't
But
know, somewhere.
when people talk about like, oh, we're getting up there and we're gonna like more and more people that we know are gonna die soon, and I'm like, what are you like? I don't know. Like having lost people when I was a kid and having friends pass away, and when I was in my late teens and early 20s, both in like queer and trans community and
Yeah.
just various experiences where people were having where it was
Yeah.
difficult and
Yeah.
people were not resourced or supported. Um, I just don't have I have a real gratitude for life, and I also don't have, hopefully, a lot of the time, but I also just don't have the like shocker. Like I remember being like never shocked that people die after I was like
Yeah.
6. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like doesn't make it not devastating. Let's be real. Like I don't want to pretend that I'm in some like bliss mode. It's devastating, but I know that I knew that it happened from when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's always on the menu. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just know. I mean, and my husband's father died when he was young. So, and that was one of the first things we ever really talked about.
Wow.
And it was like we saw each other in a way I think other people just didn't. And like you said, there goes my light. Um, I I don't think it's cynicism. It's just a different understanding of the precarity of life or the fragility or the
Yeah.
whatever word you'd like to choose. But um, yeah. So I know we need to wrap up because of my shenanigans earlier. So anything else? I know we had a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your poem. I don't know if you got to say everything you wanted to say about the writing process or if there's anything else that you wanted to say.
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, let's definitely make time for the writing
Yeah.
process. Um, is there something that you want to know about the writing process?
I think you talked about what I usually am interested in. Like, I mean, I'm interested in whatever, but I think just that you had a lot of things and you sort of had to. I'm always like, I think gratified by that this prompt and this experience feels like it gives people something because that I don't know, it's meaningful to me. It helps me get through the day. Like,
Oh,
so I'm glad that it was.
yeah, it was a gift for sure. I was actually, for some reason, I was nervous about it. I was like, what am I going to say?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I am always uncomfortable wrestling with. It's like weird. I'm always uncomfortable wrestling with identity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's always better when I do, which is probably true in general, but for everything, and for everyone. But the reason I'm uncomfortable is not. Well, the reason I'm uncomfortable is usually because I'm like, how do you distill your whole life down to this sentence or this
For sure.
phrase? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not talking about identity where we're like, I'm a XYZ, this is how you
Right.
describe shorthands, or political identity kind of thing, social, But I'm talking about like who I am and where I'm from. Like I just, what I want to say is the other side is, as poignant as this felt, I also found that like normally in my writing, even though my goal is to make sure that I find the sacred in whatever difficult thing has happened or the sacred in myself, that even though that's my goal, I tend to focus on some of the worst things that have ever happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this, I did the opposite almost
Mm-hmm.
organically, where I would be like, and I think it's the phrase where I'm from, where it's like, no, I'm not from the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Like, that has molded me, but I didn't want that to be, like, there was something really healing and important to be like, I'm from a mother who taught me how to find wildflowers, that are edible. Like, what? Like, I'm from places of magic that I didn't really see before.
Yeah, and it did feel like a love letter to her in that way. I did feel that, threaded throughout, and um, I feel a lot of those same things about my mother. So, like whatever, there were challenges, obviously, but she gave me so much that has made my life better.
Yeah, and I
So,
think we live in a culture where we kind of expect so much from our mothers and then blame our mothers for so many things versus like, you know, misogyny and patriarchy and various structures.
Yeah, yeah. We weren't talking about that when I was a kid. But yes, that was happening. Well, I try to write one. My birthday's in January, so I'm gonna try to write. I try to write one a
Oh,
year, and I really want to sort of try to bring more of the magic in this year. So I will look at yours again at that time because I like you often write about the things that I'm still untangling. And so those are the darker things. And there was so much joy and magic. And it's nice to give that space too.
and I wonder why this prompt, which is what interests me also as a writer, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing you, but I'm wondering, like, why does this prompt make us want to write the magic? Because I could have easily listed so many scarier or less
Mm-hmm.
life affirming moments in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but I really just instantly it was like a magic spell in a way of like where I wanted to sort of concoct a stew of
Mm-hmm.
magic, you know, of listing all
I mean, I think it's because it asks us so quickly to think about nature. And I think that's for many of us, that is the most magical part of our childhoods. And I've noticed it in everyone's poems that it's like the thing I connect to, even if it's not a natural thing I've ever experienced. I've never experienced wild violets, but I'd like to. And I think that a lot of us don't necessarily. I mean, I do because the ocean was very much like my best friend, my first best friend. But I think a lot of people maybe don't as much. But I think most people have a tree or a lake or something that was there for them. And there's something just, I don't know. It's like giving thanks to that thing that
Yeah,
got you
I
through.
forgot that's how we started because the prompt does immediately ask you to name your relationship to nature
Mm-hmm.
or memories of nature and relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
that's so gorgeous for setting a tone.
Yeah, because they're mostly, I mean, they're almost all positive. Probably every single one is positive. I don't think anyone's ever like, oh yeah, this piece of shit. Like, I mean, it's just
That
not
tree fucked
yeah,
me up.
yeah. Like I mean, the natural world is what gives us support in life, you know? And I think when we're younger, we feel that so acutely.
Sorry,
Oh,
one
it's
sec.
okay.
I completely agree. This little guy wanted to
Oh,
come close to
and he looks like your seat
the
cover.
He was making a fuss
Oh, that's so
at the floor
adorable.
when he wanted to be
My
put.
dog is asleep, and doesn't care. but but it's here. Yeah, I think that's part of it, and I think there's also something really like you with the all slogan, which made me laugh. Like there is something about um, remembering those things from childhood that is also transports you, and you usually think of like a jingle, or it seems that it is often something that felt like it holds some energy that is positive and I don't know.
I
It's just those things.
Yeah, the prompts are so amazing the way they transport
Yeah.
people, transport me
Yeah.
as a writer. Like,
Incredible.
yeah, yeah, that was a gift. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Anna. And we're both in LA, so we have to see each other in real life
Oh,
sometime.
can we?
Yeah, definitely. We should. Um, we'll figure it out offline. Please get to your appointment.
I will. But thank you so much. This has been so
Thank you.
beautiful.
It's
Appreciate it.
been wonderful. I thank you so much. Okay, bye.